So, I just finished God of War Ragnarok. And honestly, I was surprised at how this game turned out. It was an amazing experience, and I played the first game pretty recently. I played it during COVID. I mean, I had it before in 2018, but I never finished it for various reasons. And I got ahead to finishing the first game, and it was amazing. I loved every moment of it. And God of War Ragnarok, to me, is such a great, I'd say, not conclusion. It's not a conclusion to that story, but it kind of is and it kind of isn't. It adds on to the first game so well. They work together so well in a way that I just love. Alright? Because I want to talk about this. I talked about it a little bit, I think, previously, about how I feel like I can't properly discuss this game without putting the first game in it as well. Like, whenever I talk about how good God of War is, I always put the two games together now after I play this game. Because I feel like God of War Ragnarok relies a lot on the first game, and the first game relies very little on the original trilogy, so you don't have to really compare them together. But God of War Ragnarok is a direct sequel. So I'm going to really talk about God of War. Obviously, I'm talking about God of War Ragnarok, but I am going to tie it in a bit to the original game at some point. I did love the development of Atreus and Kratos' relationship. That was the core of the game, really. That was the major focus that they decided to go with. They focused a lot on their relationship and how they felt towards each other and different things. The conflict between them, Atreus growing to be a man. And we see that a lot throughout this game, and it's very interesting. I will say, I loved the Atreus gameplay bits, because as someone who was struggling to get a handle over the combat system for whatever reason, I don't know why. Just, it wasn't clicking with me, I don't know why I kept forgetting to dodge. When Atreus had his first combat stuff, it worked very well for me. It was very clean, it was very smooth, it was more distance based, so I could get a handle on it more. And I enjoyed it. And I think making Atreus fun to play was something I really, really liked. Because obviously, as you know, in the Spider-Man games made by Insomniac, a lot of the side characters that you get to play as don't play very well, right? Aside from Miles Morales, of course, because he has Spider-Man ability, so he plays essentially the same with a few extra bits and pieces there, right? But the characters you get to play as in this game, so Atreus and things like that, are really, really unique from Kratos, right? And in a way, it's a refreshing takeaway from the idea of playing as Kratos, and based on what happened at the end of the game, it's very well set up to kind of grow us accustomed to how Atreus fights for a potential sequel down the line. And while we're on this, spoilers ahead for God of War Ragnarok, although I probably spoiled a lot already. This game obviously continues with the Norse mythology thing, and there's a heavier focus on Thor and more on Asgard itself rather than like things like previous where it was more focused on Baldur specifically and Freya. Now these are still important characters. Baldur's death still plays a lot of a role in the first 10 hours of the game, and it's key to Freya's involvement at the beginning, and it kind of pushes forward. Freya's character development in this game, and just carrying on from what happened in the first game, is fantastic. Turning her into a major character, and it's great to see because you can see her anger, you can see how she deals with stuff. Her combat when she's like your assistant character is really cool, and her dialogue with Kratos is like really insightful to both these characters. One thing I was talking about a lot was Kratos' daughter, right? Because I knew about that and I was like, he never talks about her to Atreus. But he actually did say something to Freya about it, which I really liked personally, because I was like, okay, yeah, I like that he's getting it off his chest to somebody. I was a little disappointed because I don't know if I missed it in a side quest or something, but he never speaks about his daughter to Atreus or anything like that. Not to say he doesn't care for her, but it is a bit weird to me that he never brings her up or talks about her in a fond way in any capacity to Atreus. Now, I don't know if that will happen at some point. See, my whole theory before this game played out was that how Odin was going to get Atreus on his side was he was going to make Kratos seemed like the bad guy who killed his daughter. You know what I mean? And he was going to turn that against him by using Atreus. Right? That was my original thought process. That's what I was kind of going for. And they didn't go with that. They went with like something I really, really enjoyed, where it had Atreus making dumb decisions, but also people were helping him back in ways I thought was really interesting. Sindri was a key character in this game, keeping Atreus on the right path. And I think that breaking point for Sindri, where he completely breaks and turns into someone who hates Atreus, and you know, everything was taken from him. And we don't even know the full extent of what he did for Atreus, which is what makes it so interesting, because it can be expanded on in future elements. You could even say how he talks with the giants. He could be angry at Faye as well. You know, he doesn't directly talk about Atreus. He says, "You giants just take and take," right? And that's interesting. And I love that. I love that concept, and I hope it's further brought upon. I do know there's some side quest stuff people were talking about, but I haven't gotten to that yet. Although I do know people say that it doesn't completely resolve his plotline. I think the whole combat system in general was improved to a degree that I really enjoyed. It took me a while to get a hang of it, oddly enough. I don't know why. But once I did, it was really fun and fluid to play through. And just kind of getting back into the routine of it and everything like that, you know? And I enjoyed it a lot, because there was a lot more of it this time. It felt like it was a lot, and the variety was a lot better. You know, there wasn't as many trolls. The variety of bosses was excellent. Can we talk about those boss fights actually, right? The boss fights were phenomenal in this game. Absolutely amazing. Your first bout against Thor was like, oh, I loved it. It was like chef's kiss. Absolutely beautiful. Amazing. That moment where you die and he brings you back to life like when an L shot down this fucking lightning thing. Oh my god. I loved it so much. It was like, oh yeah. That was great. And furthermore, a lot of it was like, a lot of the boss fights against like Graham, for example, and even the boss fights against Freya and the more smaller ones, they all had impactful like cutscenes and fight scenes. And even the thing against Heimdall at a certain point is a key turning point for Kratos' character. So not only were all the boss fights unique in how they played, they were also unique in what moments occurred in them. You know, it was more variety, which, to be honest, is what this series needed, and it was absolutely amazing. And we got to see the different changes from Fimbulwinter and how it affected the other realms and everything like that. Though your main base was Sindri's house, which I thought was an interesting way to put it, and obviously hints at something that will happen later on in the game, because it's called Sindri's house and not Brock's house. But I have to say 100% that I think this game was fantastic. Now, I know Elden Ring won the Game of the Year, and I know people are probably saying like, oh man, it's still not as good as Elden Ring. And Elden Ring has its own fantasticness to it, okay? But I think if you're looking for a better complete story and fluid gameplay and just characters you can't take your eyes off of, because they're just so well written, and an interesting lore and world built upon Norse mythology and previous games, God of War is exactly that, right? Elden Ring was more of an open experience, and that was what its charm was, right? It was an open experience, and it had some characters to it, but nothing compared to God of War in this regard. Christopher Judge was a mastermind in terms of his performance. They were excellent. The faces Kratos makes, the character development he goes through, the developing as a father, as a person, and his grief and his sort of, what would you say, his struggle with trying to protect his kid, and how he can do it without pushing Atreus away from him, and how he deals with it, and how he grows to trust Atreus, and his judgment culminates so well at the end of the game. I'm sure I don't know if I had this as the thumbnail of the video. I probably did. But that scene where they hug each other after Atreus was away in Asgard for the first time, sublime. I love that. It was so good. I love the father-son moments in this. That was one thing I really loved about the original game. The scene where he teaches him when they're drinking wine together and he goes, ah, and he throws the bottle behind him. You know, that sort of scene. I love that in the original game, right? And I love these father-son moments. And I think that's what really made the game for me, was because that was such a major focus. And Odin as a final boss fight, right? Let's talk about the boss fight for a second. He was a good boss fight, but I don't know, right? Odin, I liked Odin's sort of demeanor. The character design was great. But I have to say, in terms of a boss fight, it wasn't really what I was focused on. I enjoyed the Thor boss fight slightly more. I did enjoy the Odin boss fight. But I feel once again I was more focused on how it was going to end, what was going to happen. I thought Kratos was going to die. And that interesting twist in how they pushed away from that to have Odin be the one who died. Now, I haven't looked at the scriptures since then, so I can't see if I'll notice something now that I should have noticed before. But I have to say, it was an interesting twist, and how it builds on Atreus having his own game and Kratos' new future and what's going to happen further on. I'm really looking forward to it. I will say, in terms of the game, the music as well. I know I talk about the music every time I talk about a really good game, but the music is so key to it. Whenever a big scene happened, oh my god, the slow music with the vocals where it would rise up and it'd be like, oh, oh. Absolutely amazing. And I loved it. Absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna talk, every character in this game was an S tier character, super well written. Thor as a pop culture icon is very important in today's world, right? And he was written fantastically. You grew to really care for his family dynamics, and you kind of cared for what you did. You felt sorry for what you did to his kids, right? And how it affected his family. Now, to be fair, you care a lot about Trude, and because she's friends with Atreus, right? And you care a lot about what you did to them, but she never shows that emotion, right? She doesn't seem to care much about her brother, but she does care about her father. And there's a scene where Thor gets drunk, right? And she talks to him about it. She's like, me and Mom are here for you, right? That scene, it was great because it pulls on Thor's character, it changes it around and makes it a more introspective character. And you're dealing with two sides of the same coin, right? You have Thor and his family and Kratos and his family. And we see how they intertwine near the end. And what happens to Thor is truly sad because we won't get to see him more with that amazing design and smoldering voice, right? And I have to say, once again, they did him very, very well, and they gave a lot of justice to him and his character, and I'm really happy about that. The Asgardian gods were done fantastically. I wasn't expecting to sympathize with a lot of them. I even thought they might turn Odin around at some point, but obviously not. I do think if you dislike Atreus, you're going to have a very difficult time with this game, because he is really the major focus of this game. We do have, it's kind of a duopoly, right? You have Kratos and you have Atreus. And the game is sort of split relatively evenly between the two of them. And Atreus grows new relationships. You see his relationships with animals and with people his own age, like Trude and Urbosa, I believe her name is. I kept getting it wrong. And different people like that. And I thought it was great. Alright, obviously I got annoyed at some of his decisions, which I think you're supposed to, right? Because you're remembering you making similar decisions for some people. Or you just think it's absolutely and utterly stupid. Well, hey, it worked out in the end because it made sense for his character, and the way they made him develop made it really interesting. You know what I mean? They didn't just have him come to that conclusion. It was a slow burn. And then when Brock died, how Kratos dealt with it, you could see him changing as well. It all culminated within the last few hours. And I feel like a lot of people I heard when I was looking up thoughts on it didn't like how the pacing went. I did, because the quickness of how Kratos tried to get him over Brock's death and try to move on makes sense to me, right? Because he's like, well, I am improving as a father. I can talk to him, but I'm not going to do it for so long. We learn to grieve in our own time, and we get what needs to be done first, right? He gets him away from the battlefield, lets him grieve briefly, sorts it out, and is like, we'll go back. You can grieve about this later. You know what I mean? And he does it in a way that doesn't sound as aggressive as how I'm saying it, but it was just absolutely brilliant. Again, Christopher Judge sells every single moment in this game so wonderfully. Now, moving on to talking about Brock, though. Brock was an amazing character in this game as well, and I know I've talked about how I felt like every character was done so well, but Brock had a lot more focus in this game because obviously he dies during the game, so they wanted to focus on him a decent bit. But both Brock and Freya were key points. Their storylines in this game were key points for Kratos' development on how he can care for people that he doesn't have responsibility over, and he understands his mistakes and how he can correct them, and comforting Brock in the way he did by asking for the blessing of a blacksmith was it was a tear-jerking moment, if I'm going to be honest. It was fantastic. And I feel like they drove home the parallel of Odin and Kratos a lot more with the Dropnir spear and stuff like that, with Kratos having the Dropnir spear. And I'm excited to see what happens, right? Of course I am. I'm excited to see where it goes, what we're going to have to do. I don't think we're going to get another game for, I'd say, about 4 to 6 years. I'd say they're going to let us sit with this game for a while. We might get a little bit of DLC at some point. But I'm quite happy with this game, if I'm going to be honest. I am probably going to go and play the original game again, if I'm going to be honest, and just see what I can see again. And I like the fact we get to see little moments with Faye. And I know I talked about this a lot when I was talking about it. But the little moments we get to see with Kratos and how he develops slowly and how Faye had an effect on him and how Atreus is having an effect on him, I really liked. The only thing, and I'll say it again before I move on to another topic, is that I feel like it would have made more sense for him to bring up his daughter at some point. You know, talk about the failings he had in raising a child before and how he would like to fix them, or how he cared for his wife and child and how the mistakes that he did, he doesn't want in Kratos, he doesn't want Atreus to repeat or to have a similar experience, and he talks about that, but he never did, which is a little disappointing. But again, maybe he thinks he's still too young to hear about the Ghost of Sparta and all the details of how that became a thing. But I did want to see that expanded upon. And as for Fenrir, I love the wolves in this game. The fur effects in this game are so gorgeous. Oh my god, they look sublime. Absolutely gorgeous. And Fenrir, when he becomes the giant wolf, oh my god. It looks so realistic and it looks so clean. You know, and I wish at some point you got a ride on Fenrir. I'm not gonna lie, I wish at some point you would, like, imagine riding into Ragnarok on Fenrir or something like that. That shit would be so cool. Unfortunately, we didn't get to do that, but hey, you live and dream, right? I will say we had a lot of support characters in this game. You had Freya, you had Thor, you had Trude, and things like that. And extra little game modes I would have liked to have would have been like a battle arena mode where you could just be on constant enemies but playing as these other characters. And I know these are little extra features added to a story-based game, but I feel like they would have added small things to these games that I would have really enjoyed, because I love the game a lot and I have a lot more to say about it, but I do think there were those small issues, right? The depth at which they allowed the support characters to play made me think I could play with them anyway, and so the fact that I couldn't was a bit disappointing. I also felt that Trude, although she was an interesting character, was kind of left on the cutting room floor for Thor's final decision, right? They had it be Kratos that got to him. I would have thought it would have made more sense for Through to be the one to kind of reach out and to physically see that her affecting him had an impact, but then Odin took it away. She got there moments later to not, so she didn't see it properly, which I thought undermined it a little bit. And in retrospect, with all the Tyr stuff, right, it made sense why Atreus moves away and doesn't tell people about Ironwood. But I do think that at some point, he probably should have informed Kratos more. You know, told him about the prophecy, because he knows how Kratos feels about prophecies. Not necessarily about Ironwood, he could have just said he had a dream about it. But I felt like that would have made more sense. Because obviously he knows how Kratos feels and it wouldn't have changed his perception. But it's really hard for me to kind of pick flaws of this game. It was honestly a beautiful experience, one I'll never forget. I enjoyed the story, the characters, the music, the environments. Oh my god, the environments. They were so bloody gorgeous, right? Absolutely amazing. I will say, you know, I would have liked to be able to use Mjolnir at some point and beat shit around with that. But hey, what are you going to say? Anyway, my overall thoughts in this game. 9.9 out of 10. A bit too much walking. Ableist if you ask me.